Hey, welcome back to another video. This is proof the United States dollar is crashing. I'm about to play a video from another expert telling you the same thing, basically, but it's obviously not that, Anyways, watch this video. It's going to be explained. Not that hard to understand. Watch this video coming up. You should be in things like gold, Bitcoin, stocks, stuff like that. Like, not the United States dollar or any currency, because obviously currencies go down in value over time. Obviously, when you're younger, everything was cheaper and it's more expensive now. Simple math, not that hard, but this person's going to explain it very in-depthly so you can understand what's going on. Stay tuned for the rest of the video. Oh, and I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice.
Arab Emirates, or UAE, just announced that they are leaving OPEC after 60 years of membership. And everybody's talking about how this is going to impact the Middle East, but I want to do something a little bit different. I want to talk about how this is going to impact the dollar, because this is something that most people are completely overlooking, and it has some big consequences. Why? Because this move has a direct impact on something called the petrodollar. But before I get too ahead of myself, let me take a step back and help you understand what's going on by going back in time a little bit. Let me ask you a simple question. What's the value of this $100 bill? And you might say, well, that's easy, Jaspreet. It's $100. But what is $100? Because what $100 can buy you today is very different than what $100 could buy you 5 years ago. And it's extremely different from what $100 could buy you 50 years ago, because 50 years ago, this $100 bill could buy you way more stuff. And that's because our money, or what we call money, has gone through multiple transitions, and it could be happening again. What do I mean? Well, prior to the year 1971, our dollars were backed by physical gold. So that's where many people said it was real money, because if the government wanted to spend a lot of money that it didn't have, it couldn't just do that because we needed more wealth, and that wealth was more gold, and you can't just print more gold. But that changed on August 15th, 1971, because that was when then President Richard Nixon temporarily took the United States dollar off of the gold standard.
I have directed Secretary Connally to suspend temporarily the convertibility of the dollar into gold or other reserve assets.
Now here we are 55 years later, and we're still temporarily off that gold standard. But when we were taken off of the gold standard in 1971, we went from money backed by gold to now fiat currency, which means our dollars are no longer backed by physical gold. They're backed by a promise by the United States government that these dollars have value. So people trust that the dollars have value, and because people trust and believe that these dollars have value, $100 can buy you groceries and other stuff. And then things got even more interesting a few years later in 1974, because that's when the petrodollar was established. And what happened here was the United States made a deal with one of the biggest oil producers in the world, Saudi Arabia. And the United States said, let's make a deal. You, Saudi Arabia, are going to take your oil profits and you're going to save them in the United States dollar. More specifically, they said that Saudi Arabia, you're going to take your profits and you're going to buy United States treasuries, essentially meaning you're going to take your oil profits, save it in the dollar. In exchange, we, the United States, are going to give you weapons and we're going to protect you militarily. And essentially what that did now is oil around the world started to be priced in the United States dollar, because now Saudi Arabia became an advocate for the United States dollar to get the world to buy oil in United States dollars. But why does that matter? Because remember what I said just a minute ago. This dollar is now fiat currency. It's not backed by gold. So the reason why the dollar has value is because believe it has value. People trust it has value. And the more that people use this dollar, the more belief and trust that it's going to have. And one thing that every country in the world needs is oil. And if every country in the world has to buy oil with United States dollars, that all of a sudden gives a lot more value to the United States dollar, even though it's not backed by gold. But because anybody who wants to buy oil, which is everybody, has to keep these United States dollars. So all of a sudden now, the dollar has some more value thanks to oil. This petrodollar system ran in the background for many decades quietly. Most people didn't even know that it existed, but it kept the dollar strong. It kept value in the United States dollar. But then things really started to crack after the pandemic. Why? Because now the United States government started to spend a lot of dollars that it didn't have, which meant a lot of money, or dollars, had to be printed out of thin air. And as more of these dollars started to get printed, people started to get concerned about the United States dollar, and other countries around the world started separating themselves from the United States. So what we saw happen in 2023 was that this petrodollar system started to crack. In 2023, Saudi Arabia, the same country that built the petrodollar system with the United States, started selling oil not in the United States dollar, but in the Chinese yuan to China. I'm going to go deeper into the impacts of that in just a second, but now here we are in 2026, and now we have the news that the UAE is going to be leaving OPEC, which has other implications on the United States dollar as well, which I want to get into. Now that you understand the foundation, let's get a little bit deeper, and this is where I want to remind you that if you're an investor or want to become an investor, I put together a brand new free investing masterclass where I walk you through how you can get started as an investor and find hidden investment opportunities. I'm going to show you the exact framework that my firm and I use to research investment opportunities before they hit the headlines. It's completely free, and you get this masterclass for free for just signing up to Market Briefs, which is my newsletter for investors, which is also free. So if you want to get this investing masterclass and Market Briefs all for free, all you have to do is sign up, and I have that link for you down in the description below. So the pandemic happened in 2020, and the United States government started spending a lot of money that they didn't have. They were sending out unemployment checks. They were sending out big stimulus checks. They were sending out these big PPP loans. They were bailing out businesses left and right. All this money was going out, but the government didn't have all this money, which meant all of this money had to be printed, which might have you scratching your head. If the government could just print all these trillions of dollars, why do we have to pay taxes in the first place? And the reason is, if the government is working with a central bank, the Federal Reserve Bank, to print all this money, the value of the dollar is going to lose money, because you can print more dollars, but you can't print more wealth. That was the whole idea behind the gold standard, is you can print the dollars, but the gold is what's backing the dollar, so you're not actually producing more money. But now when you have a currency that's not backed by physical gold, you can print more dollars, but you cannot print more wealth. Well, that's the problem that many countries around the world started to identify. They said, if the United States is printing all these dollars, isn't that going to hurt the value of the dollar? And is that what we want to base our economy around? Because the United States dollar is the world's reserve currency. So what we started to see happen is, around the 2020 time, more and more countries started to distance themselves from the United States and the United States dollar, because they felt this might be an opportunity to strengthen their own currencies as a way to compete with the United States economically. And then things started to accelerate because of the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. After Russia attacked Ukraine in 2022, the United States sanctioned Russia by freezing and seizing their assets, which were kept in United States dollars. Now, first, you might hear that and say, well, what does Russia have anything to do with this? Well, it wasn't just Russia watching. It was countries around the world. They all had the exact same thought. If the United States doesn't like what Russia does, and then the United States, what's stopping the United States from doing this to the other countries' assets as well? That didn't destroy the dollar or anything like that, but it had these other countries scratching their heads and starting to look for an exit or an alternative to the United States dollar. Now, the reason why I tell you that is to emphasize that the United States dollar has value, because people believe it has value. And to help you understand what I mean, back in 2001, 72% of global currency reserves were saved in the United States dollar. Fast forward to the end of 2025, and now only about 56% of global currency reserves were saved in the United States dollar. Why? Because people are now starting to look for an alternative to the United States dollar. Why does that matter? Because again, the United States dollar has value when people believe that the United States dollar has value. This is where I want to go back to China for a second, because as you probably know, China and the United States have kind of been going head to head economically. China doesn't like the United States tariffs. The United States keeps putting more tariffs on China and all these other stuff. Well, the reason why is because the United States economy is bigger than the Chinese economy, but the Chinese economy is growing faster than the United States economy, and there's been a lot of conflict around the world, including what's going on in the Middle East, including what happened in Venezuela, because China is a big buyer of those oil sites. China is a big buyer of Iranian oil. China was a big buyer of Venezuelan oil. And that was where the United States got involved and invaded Venezuela. They got involved with Iran. But also, what's going on with China and oil is that China was the first country to create their own oil futures priced in their own currency, not the United States dollar. But that's not all. Remember what I said a few minutes ago? Saudi Arabia, the very country that set up the petrodollar agreement with the United States, then in 2023 set up an agreement with China, set up the petrodollar agreement with the United States, then in 2023 set up an agreement with China to start selling oil to China in the Chinese yuan, not the United States dollar. That was the first time that we saw this happen. in about 50 years. And now we have this discussion of what's happening with the UAE, because the UAE has been a big advocate of de-dollarization, essentially separating themselves from the United States dollar, because they've been working with other countries like India to sell oil not in the United States dollar but in their local currencies. So why does this matter? Well, OPEC is a group of oil producing countries that kind of work together. And these oil producing countries inside OPEC all believe in following the petrodollar for the most part. And so now the UAE, who has been kind of vocal about de-dollarization, said, you know what, I don't want to keep doing what OPEC says. We're going to do things the way that we want. And what we know is that the UAE kind of doesn't want to do business in the United States dollar. They want to do things on their own terms. Now, we don't know exactly what the UAE plans to do just yet, but this is where you can start to see how the value of the United States dollar is such an important concept for the United States economy, because people in the United States are working for United States dollars. They're working to save United States dollars, and it is the world's largest economy. And so when you have things that can impact the value of the United States dollar, it impacts people in the United States, it impacts the economy of the United States, it impacts the United States stock market, but it also can impact the global economy, which is one reason why you might want to pay attention to this. Now, we don't know what's going to happen next. It's something you want to pay attention to. Obviously, we'll be keeping you posted in market briefs on this channel, but let's talk about now how this could potentially create opportunities. Again, I can't tell you what to do because, number one, I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just a random guy on YouTube. And investing has risks. You are never guaranteed to make money when you invest. In fact, you will lose money at some point, so make sure you always do your own due diligence and never blindly trust a random guy on YouTube. Number one, I want to talk about gold for a couple of different reasons. And I just want to premise this by saying gold prices have